am going to do a video today just about a project that I worked on recently. 1 year ago, on the 19th of February, there were some murders in Hanau. Hanau is just outside of Frankfurt. It's a story that, honestly, I didn't know very much about when I started to work on the project. And the way that the story was told inside Germany was that there were some shisha bar murders. And if you don't know what a shisha bar is, it's basically a hookah lounge. Most of them are seen as something that belongs to the Turkish community here inside Germany. There's a lot of racism towards the Turkish community. And so the headline after the murders, the way that I remember it a year ago, was murders at a shisha bar in Hanau. That's not true on so many different levels. First of all, there were 4, or even technically you could say 5 locations, and only one of them was a shisha bar. There was also a kiosk and a bar involved, and one of the shootings happened on the street as well. Only one of them was murdered at the shisha bar. I heard from some of the family members, personally speaking with them, that their loved ones who died, their names were also written incorrectly in the newspapers. Their background was described incorrectly. Their ages were, in some publications, also incorrect. This has been a really sensitive topic inside of Germany, and I think a lot of the media here hasn't covered it as well as they could have. I wanted to do a project partially because I feel like the style of reporting inside Germany feels a bit outdated to me, to be honest. And it also feels exploitative at times, and it feels sensationalist at times as well. One of the examples that comes up for me a lot is the music that gets used on these types of reports. I often feel like there's a whole genre of music that just exists to induce anxiety and a kind of deep sense of fear and paranoia. And that music is also often used on reports about murder. And I think there's a certain sensationalism that comes with murder and comes with a mass shooting that I think is wrong. I don't think it's good for anybody to put media out into the world that gives people that feeling. Even if you're covering a horrible event that happened, I think you have to somehow accurately represent not only the facts, but also the emotional landscape that you're covering. And personally, when I went through an event similar to the Hanau shootings in Paris, the feelings that I had and the emotional landscape that I experienced was very different than that type of reporting has ever made me feel personally. So how did I get to this point of actually having a short documentary about Hanau and what happened there? I started being interested, I think, in probably November, or started to think about how the anniversary was coming up. I decided I wanted to do a project, and I would like to do it Corona willing in December and in January, and have it finished then for the 1 year anniversary in February. So at first I just started looking online for resources and people that were connected. One of the first things that I noticed was the first thing I think everybody notices if you want to get involved with this topic. It's an organization called Initiative 19. That means Initiative 19. Their members include activists and also family members of people who were victims on the night of the shooting. And they're located directly in Hanau, next to one of the locations where there was an attack on the 19th of February. So I then involved another friend of mine named Elif, and I want to show some of her pictures in this. Elif is a young photojournalism student. When I wanted to start working on this project, I thought it might be something that she would also be interested in. So together we started sending out emails to different organizations, and the response we got back was, there's already a lot of people making videos and films. We don't really need any more. And we were both a little bit confused and a little bit let down also, but we kept emailing, and then we got an email back that said, maybe the best thing would be if you come by our offices at the Initiative and we just can meet and talk. So that's what we ended up doing. Just by chance, we went on the 19th of January, and they were having a demonstration for the 11th month anniversary of the attacks on that same evening. So a lot of the family members were there in Hanau, and we just bumped into them, basically. The first person that I talked to was a father of one of the victims. I can remember really vividly how we walked with some of the family members and the other protesters back to the offices of the Initiativa, and we sat down and very quickly just fell into a conversation with some of the victims' families. And it was very intense. I think I was crying after being there for about 10 minutes or so. It was very emotional to hear their stories, and I really had the feeling that each family member that we talked to had this huge desire to have somebody listen to what had happened to them. Even though they've already given so many interviews for television reports, for podcasts, for journalists that are working in print and working online, they still have, in my opinion, they seem to have this great desire to tell someone what's happened to them and have somebody listen to them. I felt a little uncomfortable in terms of I didn't know how to behave in a situation like that. I think it helped me a little bit having the background that I have, because I eventually just started thinking, okay, how would I want somebody to talk to me if I were talking about one of the traumatic things that happened to me in my life? I also just tried my best to pay attention and give them my full attention. I didn't record anything. I had the camera in my lap at that point, and I just was talking with them. Shortly after we had sat down, I met the father of Willy Paun, who is one of the victims from that night, and we started talking, and we just kind of clicked with each other, is the way I would describe it. I noticed that he had an American flag as the background on his cell phone, and I told him that I was an American, and he found that really fascinating and interesting and began speaking to me in English, and we started having a conversation in English. And he told me that he really likes the colors of the American flag, and that's why he has it as his backdrop. I found it very easy to talk to him, and I trusted him right away, and I felt like he also trusted me. And we exchanged phone numbers and set up a time to do an interview. So then the day came around when we were going to do the interview. I have never felt more anxious and fearful about getting a video right. I had this nightmare of arriving and setting up the camera and believing that I had filmed for an entire hour and getting home and there being nothing at all on the camera card, or the sound being bad, or the focus being bad. I remember packing all my gear up and checking so many times whether I had everything with me, trying to make decisions that were smart in terms of not to use equipment that I wasn't familiar with, but also try to use the best equipment that I had because I wanted to deliver my best for them. I also took a teleprompter with me, which I ended up using to set up the camera in a way that I wouldn't be behind the camera, and the person we were interviewing would feel like they could look directly into the camera, but they were actually making eye contact with me over a video screen. So I was Skyping with our interview subject, and we were looking at each other, even though for him it felt like looking at the camera, and for me it just felt like looking at a phone that was connected over Skype. That's a system that I had heard about from other filmmakers, specifically Errol Morris, who's a documentary filmmaker that I really like, and something that I always wanted to try out because it feels like a very humane way to interview people, especially when you're talking about traumatic subjects. I remember when we arrived, seeing Willy's father again, and again feeling really comfortable, and I didn't feel pressure or that there was any kind of awkwardness between us. And he was so gracious to us, and so was his wife also. We sat down and started the interview. It was very emotional. I have to say something that's, I really don't want to forget to say. Something that occurred to me later was, all of these families who lost their children, they lost them at the very beginning of 2020, which was, for the entire world, one of the most difficult years since World War II, and difficult specifically because of the isolation of it. And they've gone through one of the most painful things that any human being can experience, which is to see your child die in a violent way, in a senseless and violent way. And they had to go through the entire year of 2020 living that nightmare. The fact that Willy's father sat down and gave an interview and was so coherent in his dedication to getting the facts right and to being honest and to showing evidence for what he was talking about. After everything that he's been through and after living through that in 2020, I can't say enough how much deep respect I have for him, how impressed I am with his strength of character and his strength of intelligence to be able to even speak without a camera rolling to another person about what's happened to him. He opened up and really let Elif and I into his private thoughts and into his grief, and was such a kind human being to us. So then I remember when we left Hanau, we were both had a kind of mixed feeling of success for having accomplished what we set out to accomplish, but also just deep sadness with being confronted with such a tragedy. Then over the next few weeks, it was all about editing. I had some help from two people that were really instrumental in helping me shape the whole story. One of them was Karine Mayoka, who you probably know from her photography channel that she has. I contacted her because I really feel like she has this great sense of telling complicated stories in a way that feels so seamless and so well thought out. And she has this real talent for sort of visual storytelling, I think, where two different visual elements will combine and help transport you from one idea to another idea. And I just want to show one example of something that she made while we were working on this project. It was a diagram of the entire timeline of the interview that I had cut together, and she had highlighted sections where B-roll could be added, and just the whole sensibility that she brought to this project was an enormous help. The other person was Monica Hellstern, who is a journalist here in Frankfurt, and she did a terrific job in helping me go over every single word in the video to make sure that it was accurate, and especially the text that I added was clear and accurate and up to the standards of professional journalism. Without the two of them, I don't think this video would have turned out anywhere near as well made as it is. And there was a minute where we were pitching it to a really big news organization in the United States. I'm not going to say who it was, but it's a news organization that everyone in the world knows the name of. At some point, I realized also that every email I was sending them was coming from a sender named The Quiet American, because I was sending it from my email account that's connected to this YouTube channel, which felt really unprofessional. Clearly, they did say no in the end after a bit of back and forth. But the experience really taught me about how those negotiations work, and also helped me in my thinking about the project. I had to type up an explanation of what I wanted to do in the video and the story that I wanted to tell. And all of that really helped to shape my thinking about the story and how I could edit the material together. So in the end, it was a really beneficial process, because I knew that Billy's father was interested in some international coverage of what had happened to his son, and I really wanted to be able to be a part of that somehow for him. I think the news market in the United States is very insulated in terms of that. They don't cover a lot of world events unless the world event has some direct connection with the United States. I think there's a direct connection where racism has become so explosive a topic in the United States because of police racism. There were so many parts of the story of Hanau that also included racism on the part of the police, but also it was something fueled by one individual's personal racism. And I think there's so many parallels to what we're seeing in the United States and what we're seeing inside Germany and other countries as well. I mean, another huge parallel is that the shooter in Hanau essentially was a QAnon believer, and he was also making videos where he was claiming the whole list of the typical QAnon beliefs.
In your country exists so-called deep underground military bases. In some of them they praise the devil himself. They abuse, torture and kill little children in an unbelievable amount, and this happens already for a long period of time.
These were some of the most prized beliefs of the shooter in Hanau. And so I think there's a lot of room there to make parallels, but in the end, this news organization just decided it didn't fit in with their plan for the year, and they declined. So since then, I've tried to decide what to do. I've also offered it to other news organizations, have either gotten a no back or just no response up until now. In the end, I decided to create my own channel for it, with the hope that if it's some kind of material that I would like to see, then other people would like to see it as well. So the new channel is called Invisible Pictures, and the project is called The Story of Willy Virel Paun. His story is a really fascinating one in terms of everything that happened that night. He's somebody that actually tried to stop the attacks from happening and was eventually killed because he involved himself in that way. I really appreciate it if you give it a watch and if you share it. If you want to check out Elif and her photojournalism work, I'll put a link in the description. I'll also put a link to the Initiativa in Hanau if you want to check them out, or if you want to make a donation to them or find your own way to support them. Thanks for listening to this. Thanks for watching this video and allowing me to take the time to be a little more serious on my channel and talk about this project and my new channel that I'm opening to try to have a place where I can put projects like this out into the world.